My name is Holly Amato, and today I have Angela Avery, a licensed professional counselor, with me today on the Onward and Upward show. Angela's been in counseling for over 10 years now and has helped nearly 1,000 therapy clients find peace, clarity, and healing. Thank you so much for joining me today, Angela.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I am too. I'm excited about this conversation. It's going to be a lot of fun. But before we get started today, I thought the viewers would really be interested to know that not only were you a competitive ice skater, but
Yeah.
you were also on the MSU dance team, which happens to mean a lot in my house as both my girls were involved in competitive dance growing up. I just have to know though, is this something that you've kept up with, either of these talents? And if so, we need to know the secret to
Well, that was 1,000 years ago. And as much as I think I can still keep up, I don't think I
that.
should keep up. But I will say that every year at Michigan State for homecoming, they allow MSU dance team. We were called MSU Motion at the time. They
Okay.
allow us on the field. And so it is so much fun. Us old women get to go out and still do the fight song and a couple of other cheers on the side. It's a lot of fun.
I'll bet that is fun. We used to do something on a very small level. We would have the parent dance
Oh,
and the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
kids loved it, right? Like they would get a song and we would do the dance and it was great. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, good
Love
for
that.
you. I think that's
Yeah.
amazing.
It's fun.
Exactly. You gotta do something, right? You just have to
Yeah,
keep moving, keep improving, and let the kids know that we still got it and we're awesome.
that's right. It doesn't feel the same. You have to use a lot of, pain meds after, but it's still
Bengay,
fun.
see the
Still fun.
chiropractor. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure. All the things.
exactly.
All the things.
Exactly.
Well, today's topic is really near and dear to my heart because I really could have been your perfect client about 13 years ago. Although,
Okay.
obviously, that's a little bit sooner than you got in, but we could have at least been friends, right? When I was going through and healing from my divorce and really trying to find my footing again. And I know that you focus really heavily on relationship counseling, ranging from healing from narcissistic abuse all the way to working with couples who want to save their relationship. And I'd love to hear what really led you to focus on these types of issues as you specialize with your clients.
Yeah, great question. So I went through a very contentious divorce about 20 years ago. And it was quite scarring. Like you mentioned, you've experienced that as well. And it really made me want to help actually children of divorce. And so I started really working in that population, children and teenagers. And then I realized, wait, these moms need a lot of help. So when I started my practice 11 years ago, I was really focused on helping people in a divorce. Since that time, really the rise of toxic relationships has been unbelievably prevalent. And so I help people that are experiencing a little bit more than just what we would consider high conflict. And I do want to talk about high conflict, but somebody that's maybe more narcissistic, somebody that after divorce continues to be abusive, that's called post separation abuse. So I started because I wanted to be helpful. I wanted somebody like me for me before, just like you said. You would have really benefited from someone. Me too.
Right. And there's a lot to unpack there. I like how you mentioned, though, you started looking at how can I help the kids and you went towards the mom. And a lot of times kids are, with the mom the majority of the time. Not always. I know that's changing a lot lately, but it's so true, though. If you want to help the kids, help the mom. Right. Help the
Yeah.
parents, help both of them if you can. But if you
Yeah.
really want to help those kids, helping those parents heal and giving them tools and ways to move forward, that's the best way you're gonna help the kids.
Absolutely. When you have anxious kiddos, it's generally because there's an anxious parent. So, helping, especially because in a divorce situation, your spouse. This was the person you thought that would love you forever. And now all of a sudden you're in high conflict with them. It's such a mind warp. You can't put your brain around it. And then it's so stressful that of course then you're missing, your kids grow up because you're worried about the stress, the financial responsibility, you have to go to work, all of the things.
Exactly. And on your website, I really like how you have it. It says how to start over and go from worried to warrior. And you talk about empowering and liberating from fear. If I'm coming to you and I'm seeing this website, I'm feeling like this is not just an ordinary website. This is not just somebody who does this for a living. This is somebody who feels it, understands it, and gets it. What is your, like, when you start working, you talked about high conflict and some other things. When you start working with someone who's maybe coming out of a divorce or going through a divorce or just in a really tough situation, what is your process for really building that relationship and working with each client?
Yeah, another good question. So my process is, first of all, we have to have a space or someone strong enough to hold all of the stress of this, right? Someone that can receive all of the bad gunk that we have in our life and not be shocked by it and not feel and not give us advice, because that's what our family does. Our family is like, oh my God, you should just, it's not helpful. We need somebody that can listen with empathy and really receive it. And that's what I'd start with. I'm going to hear the whole story. And I really work with people to find where are their strength points? Where do they have resilience? See, a lot of times in these really difficult, challenging, maybe divorce situations, or even in a couples counseling session, we forget that we're a lot stronger, and we allow sometimes people to define us, someone else to define us, and we forget about ourselves. So my process is I help with the healing, and then we figure out how strong you are and really work on empowering your decision making, empowering how you receive messages from your, let's say, toxic ex, or how you communicate more effectively in a marriage to not only lose yourself anymore, but gain some self-respect too. And then eventually, after a while, we can figure out, do we want to have another relationship or not? Some people say no. Some people say absolutely. So we'll figure that out too.
So, what I'm hearing is that it's not a one size fits all. You're coming to each counseling relationship with a plan and a process, but you're really listening to where they're at. I love how you said that you're really building on their strengths and probably also finding some of those weak points that need to be addressed. And something else that you said, like when people say you should, I call that shoulding all over you. Like when
Mhm.
people start to tell you that, it's so hard because they mean well and they want to help. But a lot of times, if they haven't been through it, it's a really tough thing to try to help someone through. And they can only
Very.
take so much, right? They don't really know what to say exactly. They're typically on your side. So they're not really seeing things clearly and just kind of fueling that fire of, oh my gosh, he or she is such a X, Y, and Z. And, and that's not helpful, right? So I think it should almost be mandated. I know we can't mandate it, but it would be nice if everybody realized it's not a weakness to reach out for help. It's actually a sign of strength because
Yeah.
you're seeing that this is something new that you're walking through, something that you haven't been through before. And why would I not want to go to an expert who's going to help me through one of the most difficult experiences probably in my life?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where people get to is they realize, oh gosh, my friends and family, first of all, they can only handle so much. And by the way, they're not actually giving good feedback, or they're not able to support me in the way that I need. And,
Mhm.
I do give a whole lot of grace for our friends and family who, thank goodness, they don't know what a narcissistic relationship feels like. Thank goodness they don't. But they can't give good advice then if they don't. And they won't understand the depth of this, the fear, the difficulty, the gaslighting. They won't understand all of it if they're not in it. And
Right.
bless their heart trying to be helpful, but sometimes we do need an expert.
We do. So let's talk about narcissism because I think you're absolutely right. I have seen that word thrown around left and right.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like it might be overused. The word bully, remember like maybe 10 years ago, that was like the buzzword. And now it's narcissistic, everything you're seeing. So I'd like to hear from you, the actual expert. What is narcissism or narcissistic abuse? And kind of maybe differentiate that from maybe you talked about high conflict. Maybe it's just a type of a high conflict. I'm sure it is type of high conflict, but what's the difference? How do you know you're actually in a narcissistic abusive situation?
Yeah. So, you're absolutely right. The word narcissism is everybody's a narcissist. Well, it's actually quite a small population. And narcissists don't really go to therapy, so they're not actually going to be diagnosed. So we're never clear as to, who has it and who doesn't. I will say most of us have some narcissistic tendencies, right? Where maybe some traits of our life look a little bit like that. But the really difficult person is going to be a narcissistic person is lacking in empathy. They have no remorse for anything they do, and they're not going to apologize for anything. They don't take personal responsibility. They're a bit grandiose, meaning they think they're better. They have more of a superiority complex. A lot of times they feel like the world has wounded them in some way, and the world owes them a debt.
Mm.
When you're in a relationship like this, it becomes very, very high conflict. They like to have nitty gritty conflictual things. They like to manipulate by using tactics like gaslighting. And I'll describe what gaslighting is in a second. You start to question your own sanity, really, in a relationship like this. Like, why is this not working? The majority of the time, people are just jerks. People are just really difficult people. Really emotionally immature. Now, when it's a pattern though, and when it's consistent, now we're going to look a little more on that narcissism idea. 1 or 2 times, okay. But over time and a pattern, and you start to see some of the exact traits that a narcissist uses, then it really looks a little bit more like narcissism.
And I know you were going to define gaslighting too, and I was going to ask because we hear that term being
That term.
thrown around as
Yeah.
well. So if you can give us a definition on that, 'cause I think it'll open people's eyes because I know, I've experienced it in various situations in life and I didn't know that's what it was. And I'm glad that you mentioned you start to feel like, am I crazy here? Because that's where it makes you feel. That's like the end result. But what is actual gaslighting? And how would you know if that's what's happening in your situation?
Yeah. You're being gaslit when the reality that you have is not the reality that your partner tells you. For instance, the sky is blue. No, it's not. The sky is not blue. Well, it's blue, but they're telling you it's not. And then you feel crazy. Like, wait a minute. Am I wrong? Is it blue? Maybe I should go look. Anytime that you feel your reality is being challenged, what you know to be true, it's gaslighting. And it's really that the term is interesting. It's actually taken from a movie, 1941, where a man kept turning the gas lights down, the actual lamps down in his house. And his wife kept saying, it's getting dimmer and dimmer in here. And he said, no, it's not. So this is where we get this term from. Yeah. Yeah. And there are other tactics too that they like to use that I'm sure you've heard of. Love bombing being one.
Can we talk about love bombing? That's new for me.
Okay. Yeah. Love bombing.
The love bombing thing is newer for me. I know it's not a new concept, but I have also experienced that. And I'm like, when you come, I think too, and I want to get to this with you, is the healing process with someone and how you're walking them through. Because I think when you're coming out of a certain situation, you're kind of vulnerable to the next one if you don't get yourself healed. And I think for me, anyways, coming out of one situation and then experiencing love bombing, I didn't know that was the word for it. You just feel like, wow, this is amazing. And you just think it's the best thing ever. And then you're like, but there's so much confusion in that as well. So if you could define that, that would be amazing too.
Yeah, love bombing is intoxicating. It feels amazing. And it is a very quick rush to intimacy, a rush to lock you in.
Mhm.
You are literally bombed with all the good, loving things for a very short, brief period at the beginning of a relationship. These are when you're taken on all the fancy big trips. You are given gifts. You are told how beautiful you are a million times a day. You are quickly told that you are loved, quickly into intimacy, things like that. That's love bombing. And it's actually a tactic to keep you. It gets you hooked.
Right. It is, like you said, intoxicating. That's a really, really good word to it.
Yeah.
So, what would you what is your advice when you're working with someone? Let's say you've got a woman who's going through a divorce or just recently divorced, and you're working on all the things. Do you give, because different therapists have different strategies. Do you give your opinion, your expert opinion, and do you say, listen, I see you going through X, Y, and Z. Now you're talking about this new relationship. Do you kind of get in there? Because I would have a hard time not saying, listen, you might need to take a time out. Let's get you healed before you jump into a relationship. That's got to be a tough situation for you to navigate. What do you do in that situation where you can see someone's going headlong into a brick wall and it's like they're going to do it again?
Yeah, happens all the time. I let people have free will, right? And I get to guide, but I don't get to tell them what to do. I am a caller outer, if you want to call it that. I like to say things like, it's interesting that you're doing this because remember when that happened, or there was a pattern that we never actually fix. I call out sort of more patterns or more behaviors instead of, you shouldn't do that.
Right. Well, that's super helpful because everyone's giving advice and you're able to, again, give that experience. And I think that's the best way to do it is to show the pattern of, what you did in the past in a nice way instead of being like, hello, didn't we already do this? This is Groundhog's Day, get off the wheel, that. So it's got to take a lot for you to hold that back and just to get into that realm of, okay, how am I going to reach this person? Again, going back to not a one size fits all. What would you say, any client that comes to you, what would be your main goal for every client that comes in and sits down and says, I'm going to need help?
Yeah. I love that you just asked me that, because that is, no one has ever asked me what my main goal is. And I love that you did. My main goal is to help women feel empowered and fearless, period. I don't want anybody to be afraid in family court. I don't want anybody to be afraid in a relationship. I don't want anybody to not know their own self-worth and to walk around being defined by a relationship or by a partner. I want you to define yourself. So my main goal is to help women feel stronger, more confident, more worthy, and make good decisions by way of being fearless.
I love that because I think fear is probably one of the strongest tools that can be used against us, or we use against ourselves to really cripple our lives in so many different ways, paralyzing us with fear, being afraid of things that 9 times out of 10 aren't even going to happen. And if they do, it's not going to go the way we've constructed it in our mind. So I think when you can really like disengage from the fear, you can really move mountains in your own life and move forward. And that, I'm sure it's different with everyone, but as you're working with your clients, what is the average time frame would you say? I know I got some information off your website, but what would you say the average time frame is when someone's coming to you? How long does it take for them? Because most people are going to be like, I want to be fixed right now. But
Yeah.
realistically, someone's meeting with you, let's say 50-minute session or so weekly. Let's say they're meeting with you weekly. What would the average time frame be, do you feel, where someone would really start to see or feel, okay, I am now choosing different things. Ooh, that's an example of how I'm benefiting from my relationship working with Angela, and starting to see some of the little things changing maybe in their lives.
Yeah. So that depends. And I hate that answer, but it depends, because how much work is someone willing to put in outside of the 50-minute session? How much work how fearless are they going to be, or how much are they going to really intuitively reflect and understand themselves and maybe do something different? If they can come all the time and listen to me and never change, that happens. Or they could go, yeah, I like that. Let me try that one thing and then see if it works. And then I come back and try another thing. So it really depends on the person, how much you want to change. Look, fear is so incredibly powerful, like you said, and we all have it. And by the way, it is intimidating to be in a divorce situation. It's intimidating. We are all empowered women. However, it's still intimidating. Okay. We have, males in the world that like to put women in a certain category. So some of it, though, is perceived.
Mhm.
We have to get past the perceived fear. What are we really afraid of? And we have to do things scared no matter what, because then it builds on our bravery a bit. It's like a muscle that we can build.
I love the saying, do it scared. I don't remember who the person was that said it, but I remind myself of that. Sometimes it's like you do have to push past your boundary level if you want to reach something that you've never had. And, as you talked about working with women going through these situations, and obviously it's not a one size fits all. I keep saying that, but it's the truth. Do you give your clients homework? Like, okay, here's what I want you to do, and ranging from all kind of probably different modalities of things, but do you give them something that they can do? And then do you also hold them accountable when they come back to say, okay, remember we talked about doing X, Y, and Z, or this exercise, or maybe it's breathing or journaling or whatever it is. I'd love to hear about some of the options you give people for outside of their time with you, and then how you hold them accountable too, as like a
Yeah.
two-part kind of question.
Uh, I love giving homework.
Mhm.
I think it's important. And I sort of summarize at the end of every session, okay, so this is what we are going to try to work on, because it's a lot of information in 50 minutes. And sometimes it's overwhelming, especially when you're retelling a story that is hurtful, right? You feel like you're getting trapped in the story again. So your brain doesn't work as well. So I like to recap. Okay, this is what we're working on. And, the clients that really are motivated, they'll write it down and they'll put a note in their phone, or some
Mhm.
people will just remember. Do I hold them accountable? Yeah. I come back the next time and say, so how did that go? And if they didn't do it, that's informative, right? What happened? What blocked you from being able to do that? What more do we need to work on? Or if
Mm.
they did do it, did it work? Did it not work? Okay, where are we at?
That's perfect. So I want to move into something else. I want to talk about triggers if we can. And I'll be vulnerable for just a second because I think people are probably I can't be the only one experiencing something, right? I always tell myself I'm not the only one. How do you help people who are like, what is in the moment? Like, I'm learning certain things like that happen, and I'll all of a sudden have like a response, like a visceral response to something. And sometimes you have no idea, and you're like, that doesn't even make sense. What would you say to people? Obviously, you work with them and you go through the steps on why is it this way and what can we do? But in those moments, do you have a plan for that? Or what are your thoughts when people are dealing with that? And how long maybe does it take to even have the body have they don't have, you don't have the muscle memory, I guess, to react to certain things. Got to change your behavior and your perception of things.
Yeah. Well, if I'm hearing it correctly, like everybody does have triggers. And I don't even know if I love that word trigger. It's
Mm.
sort of like an emotional memory and that it evokes something. It might be a body response, like all of a sudden our heart is beating really fast, not sure. But I think slowing it down then, if that happens in a session, we're going to slow it down. We're going to breathe, we're going to slow it down. We're going to make sure everybody feels safe, that, we're not being actually triggered in session. It's a perceived memory of something that is going to harm us. Look, the healing takes time, and time is the best way to, once we figure out what that trigger is, we learn how, can it really hurt us or can it not? Like we need to have some reality here. Do we have evidence that that trigger will do that again? Or it's over time, does it get better and better and better? Usually speaking, it does.
Okay. And I love that because I just think we could probably talk all day about all of the different scenarios and things that you are working with people, right? We're complex. People are complex. We've all been through different scenarios. A lot of them can probably be, put under different umbrellas, but it's just a lot. Living life is a lot. And we've had a lot thrown at us the last 5 years, post COVID, and the toll that took on people, and I think kids, my goodness, that's been
Absolutely.
something that's a whole thing all on its own. I guess so. Before I move on from anything, do you have thoughts on the state of mental health right now? Because I don't know if it's just because we have social media and people feel like they want to just say whatever's on their mind, that we're hearing more about it, that it's a bigger issue, or is it just that there's more of a platform? Like, what is your take on where we're at currently with this whole mental health situation?
My take might not be popular. I think that
That's
we over
okay.
I think
We like that.
I think we over talk about it. I don't care what a label is. I care whether people are healthy or not. Really. I care about whether you are thinking healthy thoughts, whether you're fair and balanced, whether you're, not leaning one way or the other. You can kind of see both sides, more of a flexible thinking instead of a rigid thinking. Several years ago, I remember, because I was seeing a lot of teenagers at the time, and these teenagers knew more about mental health than I did. I mean, goodness, they are all on board with anxiety and depression, and they all had it, right? It becomes a little bit contagious. And I get very nervous about that when people, just like the narcissism term, right? It becomes contagious. Not everything is a label. Sometimes it's just it's hard. And you got to deal with it. I don't want people to stay in a wimpy label and stay stuck there. You are not a diagnosis. You're not that's what you experience sometimes. That doesn't mean that's what you are. Like if you have
Mhm.
anxiety, you are not anxiety. You just experience it sometimes. And if you're not,
Right.
So we have to get beyond that. And I can talk for days about social media, but and the effect of mental health on teenagers. However, it happens for adults too. We still have comparison. We still hear things and go, well, maybe I have that. Oh, maybe my husband's a narcissist, or maybe I'm being, emotionally abused, or you're avoidant. That people throw around terms often instead of really understanding, well, let's just get better at behaving well towards each other. Let's just do better and have healthier relationships.
That. And I do, but we could talk all day about social media, right? Because I had my kids are all adults now. I have 18, 20, and 22. But, I was kind of tired of hearing about what TikTok had to say about this, and this, and, throwing around mental health terms and, this person and this, and you're acting like this. And it's like, okay, let's not play doctor right now, right? Or therapist. Let's stay in our lane. But I do think sometimes people almost wear it like a badge of honor, like, well, I have anxiety. And so that means I get to X, Y, and Z. And you now have to X, Y, and Z because this is just, quote, how I am. I think there's a danger of that too, not wanting to get past it because for some reason it just makes you feel comfortable to just say, this is who I am and you have to now deal with it, big concern.
Very relatable what you just said, for sure. Um, you know, that is such a pigeonhole. You get labeled that, or you decide, like, self-label. And so that's what you're going to be forever. Like, people should evolve and grow, and we should be learning new things. And then once we learn it, do better.
Agreed. So you are a published author. And there's so many things that you've written. I can't even go into all of them, but I know you have the book on Amazon, Surviving Divorce, which is huge, which would be a great resource. There's not a ton of them out there that I feel are great resources. I think it'd be a great resource. But I just saw all the different publications you've been in relationally. What is what is the topic that you feel like you love to write about most? And what led you? I'm sure you're very busy and you have a very full life, but what led you into feeling like, I need to publish some things too, and I want to get out there also as an author?
Yeah. Um, that's a hard question to answer because sometimes I don't know. I just get this bug in my bonnet and I feel compelled to speak something. And it just comes out and it flows and it's written. So that's sort of my process. I write often about challenging relationships, whether it's divorce, narcissistic, toxic, emotionally challenging, all the things that we can put in the label and category of challenging relationships. That could be a family member, it could be a spouse. I don't know. I find it fascinating. So sometimes I write about it. And yes, I've been published in a couple of places, been asked to speak a couple of places, do, podcasts here and there. But, that relational angle is really important to me because, again, I'm going to go back to what I want people to feel is you are in charge of your own life. You have to make changes if it doesn't fit for you. You don't have to stay stuck where you are. And that might be staying in a marriage that's really challenging. You might want to stay. That's fine. But let's figure out how to stay and make it work better.
I love that you said that because I have gotten advice similar to that from someone who is a therapist and basically said, and a friend of mine just basically said, so this is the situation, X, Y, and Z. Can't change it, but can help with behavior modification if this is the type of situation you really want to be in. How powerful that was to hear. Because when someone else says to you, basically, if this is what you want to accept for your life, there's no judgment, but I'm going to have to help you modify your behavior to basically put up with it. That was beyond powerful. So that's huge. But what would you say? So we've talked a lot about difficult relationships and overcoming and healing from them. But I know that you're an advocate as well for healing relationships. And when you have a couple, let's say, that comes to you and they've got a lot of issues going on, as everybody goes through, no relationship's perfect. There's always ups and downs. There's going to be times if anyone thinks that, oh, I should just leave a relationship just because there's a problem, then you're never going to be happy in a relationship because you're not perfect and they're not perfect. Two imperfect people. So what is your process when you've got, a couple that comes to you and says, okay, we're having some issues. What does that look like now that you've got two people together? Maybe what are some of the positives or challenges and what does the process look like there? I'm assuming it's a little different.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have a little bit of a unique perspective on marriages because I was married, divorced, married again and widowed and then dated. And now I'm in a long-term partnership. So I have quite a relationship past, I will say. I love marriages. I think working with couples is really fulfilling because oftentimes everybody still loves each other, generally speaking. They just are stuck in some big patterns that don't work. And my process is really taking the relationship that was the 1.0 version and identifying what did we do kind of wrong, if you will, or where can we work on it better? And then we take it into 2.0, which is a lot more connected, a lot more forgiving, giving benefit of the doubt. We learn better communication skills because once we have that, gosh, we definitely feel more connected when we can communicate better. So we work through a whole range of issues in a couples counseling, um, treatment plan, but connection is the biggest one that we try to work on.
Okay. Probably the C words, right? Like communication, I've always thought is where the biggest issue and breakdown in any relationship, really. And then connection, I like that too, because you have to be able to communicate and reconnect. What would you say with communication? What are maybe some strategies or maybe something that you find is everyone is maybe at risk of not communicating properly? Do you see some instances where, wow, this is a pattern? We talked about patterns where I see this in a lot of relationships, maybe like a key that you could give us that would help, that we could practice maybe today, even in relationships as we walk into maybe a tough situation with a boss or a marriage or even a friendship or just daily life. What would be maybe your best advice for when you see there's a communication issue here? What can we all maybe do that's kind of like a one size fits all that maybe would help if we all kind of just took a step back?
Yeah. So, one of the helpful things to do would be to sort of adopt a more observational stance instead of a blaming stance. Like, observational, like, hey, I got to tell you that when you do that, I feel really resentful when you do that, or I feel really disrespected when you do that. I'm just observing it, letting you know, kind of observational instead of, you make me feel, instead of blaming, right? I think we can all get better at that. Everybody can. And if we give the benefit of the doubt, especially during a couple session, that you love each other, why are we at odds? It's actually the two of us against a problem. We have this problem and the two of us have to figure out how to handle it instead of you against me. Why would we want to be adversaries? We're supposed to be married or coupled. So I think, adopting an observational stance would be helpful. This is what I observe is going on. I don't like it. Can we change it? And then it's us against the world. And, the idea that I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt.
That's huge. The benefit of the doubt. I like to think that I do that. And sometimes you do it to a detriment, right? But I do think that's a huge piece of advice instead of expecting the worst from people, because maybe that's your own perception from your own experience that didn't get healed, right? But instead of expecting the worst from people, to give them the benefit of the doubt, unless they show you otherwise, but to just step back and say, what if we, instead of expecting X, Y, and Z from this person, what if we actually give them the benefit of the doubt that they actually don't have some nefarious, you
Yeah.
know, thought process towards us?
That's right. And I think you're right. You give the benefit of the doubt until such time that it looks like a pattern. And then you again use that observational stance. Hey, I got to tell you, I've been kind of thinking that you're on my team, but all of a sudden I've noticed it doesn't feel like that to me. Again, observational. And I want to go back to something you said about the 3 C's and communication. It's funny because the first thing everybody writes down when they have an intake form for me, that they say communication issues. And then they get in session and it's not communication issues all the time. It's these 3 basic questions that we get down to in relationships. And the three big things are, do you value me? Am I important here? Do you respect me? And do you trust me? Pretty much all communication revolves around the 3 of those. So if we could really identify when people are talking, it's really about those 3 things, it changes the game for communication.
Absolutely. And, as you were saying that, my mind, I was reminded of learning, women's brains are typically wired a certain way, men's brains are wired another way, which is a beautiful thing when you can learn how to complement each other
Yeah.
Because what is it? Women are from Mars, men are from Venus, something like, or the opposite. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, that book. But what would you say men typically are really looking for in a relationship when they feel like they're not getting it? Like, what is their one thing that they feel like
Respect.
is not right? Yeah, that's what I
It's
thought.
always respect. Like, she doesn't respect me. She doesn't. And it's respect and it's physical, touch. Of course, they want to have more sex. By
Right.
the way, I'm just going to let you guys know that so do women, but there are some certain prerequisites that are going to be necessary, like emotional connection before we have some sex. Yeah.
Say it again, Angela. Say it again for everybody in the back.
Right. For the guys in the back, just
Right.
emotionally connect and you'll have a lot more sex. Women want it too.
Well, because I remember hearing, and it's true, like, women will typically, and I think we all kind of could agree with this typically, is, when you're not getting attention and all of a sudden, you're expected to turn into Marilyn Monroe, not exactly how women operate. It's just
Yeah.
not how we operate. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's uncomfortable for you to have to go into those conversations with couples, but I'm assuming you have to go there at some point.
Yeah. After 11 years, it's not uncomfortable anymore.
Good.
People really feel uncomfortable talking about it with me. But once I get through like hey, you guys, let me just tell you, I know about everybody's sex life. And then we just sort of jump in and it becomes such a powerful conversation because that's what's actually going on when you're at home. There's this underlying, stuff we're not talking about. Let's do it. Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out.
Well, yeah, because communication, right? So you're giving them the forum and the strategy and maybe even the words sometimes to actually communicate how they're feeling and what's happening. And probably the other person had no idea because they're only seeing it in their way. And now you're opening up to, this is how it feels to me. And
Yeah.
you just mentioned that men are typically about respect. What would you say women's one thing is typically?
Value, definitely value. Do you value me? Am I important here? Or am I just here because you want somebody to, cook and clean and make your doctor's appointments? And, so that's generally speaking what the conversations are about here. If you valued me, you would know I need X, Y, and Z in order to feel more connected to you.
Absolutely. So when you're working with one client, two clients, whatever the session looks like, I've already asked you what your goal is, and I love that answer. It's absolutely amazing. And I hope that people will rewatch this because I think that should be everybody's goal, right?
Yeah. Thank
To
you.
get to that place and healing and all the things. What would you say is successful? Like if you're ready what does success look like when you're working with the client? How do you know when they're ready to move on and maybe just come back when they need it? But how do you determine like this has been a successful relationship? This person is ready to move on and come back as needed, kind of a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. There was a movie a long time ago, a little kids movie. Gosh, I can't remember the name of it, but she says, when I'm no longer needed, I will leave. And
Yes.
yeah, and I can't remember the name of it, but she was a nanny, whatever the name of it.
Yes. I love that movie and I can't remember it either, but yes.
Yeah, so I sort of adopt that idea. It's going to be driven by the client though too. When we have reached all of our intended goals are, or someone is feeling really empowered and they're making great decisions and they're feeling really healthy in their life, they don't need me. And that's what this is about. You're supposed to actually, life is out there, not in here in therapy session. So
Right.
go live your life. Come back for a tune up if you need it. If you don't, then I will love you from afar. That's how it goes.
Yeah, and I love that. And that's probably, like you said, it's varying degrees of how long it takes to get there, but it has to feel great. With what I do, I mean, I'm selling houses, right? But a lot of the people that come to me have the fear and the stress because I'm a divorce specialist in real estate of, how am I moving forward? How am I going to create the life? And it does give you sense of, I can imagine for you, I'll let you answer that, but such a sense of self success and
Yeah.
wow, I am making a difference. I know you have a background where you've done many other things and led you here, but it's got to feel amazing to be able to help people and watch like the little duckling, right? They come out
Yeah.
and they're like looking around the world like, so confused. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden they're out. They're flying away, doing their thing.
Yeah.
That's
It's
amazing.
very fulfilling. People say to me all the time, "Oh my God, I could never do what you do. Oh my God, it must be so hard." And rightly so. It is very, very hard and it's very taxing on my mental health and my body. But I will tell you that I live for those times where someone has a breakthrough or someone feels so much better than they did before. And it happens all the time. And my life just, it blossoms from there because it feels so incredibly good to help somebody.
Does. And let's talk about you for a second to say, I have had that thought with therapists. Oh my gosh, how do they do this? You got to hear some really heartbreaking things. And like, how do you detach? How do you detach? Like, what is your way of detaching and not, I'm sure some of it stays with you, but what do you need to do to be able to do your quote job well, but also still take care of yourself and not allow it to really get in too deep where it's affecting your daily life and your relationships with
Yeah,
people?
therapist has to have really good boundaries, like self boundaries too. Where for me personally, like I can only see a certain amount of people every day, and then I need to go do something else. I definitely think working out in some way. It could just be a simple walk. It could be, really hardcore, but something where I move my body. I got to get some stuff out somatically, and secondarily, I need some relaxation time. I really like to take some short breaks. Maybe it's like a 3-day weekend and I go somewhere that I've never been. Not for a ton of money all the time, but just to get a different change of perspective. I will say that I carry my therapy clients with me in my brain a lot.
Mhm.
That's human. I can't do anything about it. I worry about people. I think about them constantly, but I also know that everybody is in charge of themselves and I have to stay in my lane and give them tools and then back off and allow them to live their life how they're going to and help in any way. But I got to focus on my own family and the fun things I like to do.
That's great. And the responsibility only goes so far. Like you said, you're there to do a job with them and to be there for them, but you can only do so much, go so far,
Yeah.
and you can't really go into like adopting full responsibility for someone else's choices and someone else's life. That's
Exactly.
just
And that's a really hard thing to learn, especially as a new therapist, and when you're a new therapist, you have a supervisor, you have someone that sort of watches over you for a certain amount of time. And a good supervisor will tell you, you cannot save everyone, even though
right.
you want to, but you can't. So you have to remember this over and over again throughout all the years that you do this.
I never knew that. That's good to know that you have a supervisor or at least somebody who's like that mentoring as you're getting into this field. Because again, like I said, I can only imagine some of the things that you've had to hear and you can't unhear, and you have to learn what to do with all of that at the end of the day when you go home to your family. And
Yes,
it probably does make you feel really appreciative, I'm assuming, for, the relationships and people in your life too.
it does. And it
Comparison,
also
right?
but we're human too, and we have things like I mentioned. So it's a you appreciate your family, and you also know I'm human too, and we still have stuff. But this is just my occupation. It's not my entire consuming whole. Is a therapist. I have this my occupation. I still have a life, but you're right. It gives you a little bit more perspective. It gives you the idea, and I think older therapists are really awesome because we've had a lot of life experience
Mhm.
versus someone younger. They are great too. No shade to them. But if you have an older therapist that has been through a lot of things, boy, you get a whole lot of life wisdom and experience.
Absolutely. You can't beat wisdom. I always say, I wish I could have known all of this
Yeah,
now and
I
take it
know.
20 years ago.
I know.
Everyone says that though, right? But that's the blessing of age is we have the wisdom. That's what we get. When we see little crow's marks and the different things popping up, but we
Right.
get that wisdom and we get that I can live my life and I'm free to be me. And that's amazing. When you get there, you just feel, wow, this is such a gift.
It
It's
is
a
a
huge gift.
gift.
I would love to know. So you've been in this realm in this field for 11 years. You're a published author. You've done so many other things I know that we just chatted about with your background. What does the future look like for you? Like say 5, 10 years from now, what do you see for yourself? Like, what are maybe some goals or some things that you see with the practice? Or, maybe you're thinking of retiring and changing things around, but what does your future look like?
Yeah. So I just hired a business coach, which is really something that I hadn't done before. And I'm so excited about it. I'm really looking to sort of level up in my therapy practice, get more experience helping people that are really in even more of the thick of it. I want to expand into more courses that I teach because I do teach courses, not at like a professional level, but online
Hmm.
through my own website. And I'm going to really be doing some more sort of side therapy work, if you will. It's sort of addendums to my work.
Okay. I do love the whole digital product and coaching. I think that the last couple of years it's opened up to where we can do that. And you can work with anybody anywhere, right? You can just, and some people might, be in a place where maybe they can't afford therapy right away. And my goodness, your website is loaded with resources. But I love that opportunity, where you maybe have different ways someone can quote work with you if they can't work with you one on one.
Yeah.
If you have these courses and online opportunities where they can start there and kind of move into what needs to happen, that's amazing. And I love the business coaching. I think everyone in business for themselves needs to have a coach. The big names, Tony Robbins had a coach, Jim Rohn, right? Like we
Yeah.
all, there's always that we can level up and continue to grow. And how exciting that is. That just keeps it fresh and exciting for you. I
That's
love
the
that.
thing is it really after, like I said, 11 years, I went, oh my gosh, like I haven't done this in a long time. It feels like I have a whole new business. And it really provided this big breath of fresh air. And I love it.
Yes. And I'm kind of right there with you. I'm at 10 years in real estate. And my big thing right now is because I've been licensed in Florida for 4 years. Okay. The
Huh.
exciting, little bit scary, nerve wracking thing is getting down to Florida now that my kids are, because, that was easy to be like, well, I have the kids and now
Huh?
they're all successfully doing what they're doing. And now it's like, that's probably something I could meet
Right.
with someone about is be like, okay, like I've got this fear in a good way. It's an exciting kind of fear. And moving forward, I'd love to hear your thoughts on as we're getting older and we're getting to these spaces where maybe we're feeling like not so much stagnant, but like you said, we've done the same thing and we're looking for that change. So I don't know if there's something you've been able to help people with or if you're getting some insight from your business coach, but I would that be something someone can come to you and say, "Okay, I need help like getting past this hurdle. Like I want to do it, but
Absolutely.
something's holding me back?"
Yeah, well, absolutely. And by sheer way of, I have pivoted so many times in my life that my
Right.
career path goes a little wonky. And I love the idea of getting some guidance about that. Because again, it goes back to that fear and empowerment, right? And yeah, why not? And we should be talking to people and getting new perspectives on it. I certainly don't have all the wealth of ideas. I'm sure there are others that have more. So we need to talk to each other to figure that out.
I love that. And I love when we get into forums of people who are all going for the same thing, like in a program that I'm in currently, where we do have like an audience of people, like on the school platform, that's one of them. They have Discord and different things, but it's great when you can get with other like minded people. They don't have to be doing exactly what you're doing, but I do feel like the mind needs some sort of stimulation. I don't know if there's brain research to that, but it does feel good when you're actively moving forward and you feel like maybe it's just the feeling like I'm taking control of my future. Maybe that's what's feeling so good. I don't know, but I just think it's just, would challenge people who maybe are feeling stuck,
Mhm.
to look
Yeah,
outside of how can we expand on what you're doing? Or maybe you hate what you're doing. Let's look in ways that we can change that,
yeah,
you
builds
know?
confidence.
Exactly. Exactly. So, what would you say? Is there anything maybe we didn't touch on, or is there any broad spectrum advice or anything that you would want people to know in any way about, the mental health realm or just what it's like to work with you, or just what do you want people to know?
Yeah, I want people to not be afraid to go to therapy because I think therapy is for the brave.
Hmm.
It doesn't signal weakness, it actually signals strength, just like a business coach or if you need a specialist in some area. So people need it for life as well, and especially around relationships. Gosh, wouldn't it be great just to put a small investment in to get a big huge return? That seems logical to me. So I would love people to do that. I am kind of a no BS sort of therapist. I call it like I see it, but warmly and usually with a little humor. But I think it's important to have somebody challenge you and to learn new things, and especially someone with wisdom and perspective.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that because, you'll see on TV and they always seem to like to be funny. They're characterizing the therapist as well, how does that make you feel? As the person's laying on the couch and you're like, if I knew how it made me feel, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So the no BS, I appreciate it. And I think a lot of people appreciate that. And I know you can't tell people what to do, but when you do call them out, like you said, hey, didn't we try that before? And how did it go for us? So I appreciate that you're doing that with people. And I know that they appreciate it as well.
Yeah, my
100%.
clients do. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Because again, if we knew, we wouldn't be coming to you, right? It's like,
Right.
okay, let's play the 100 question game and our time is up now. And you're left being like, oh, what?
What
What do
happened?
I do?
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I know people probably do want to ask you all the time, what do I do? And, you're not the one living with the consequences, good and bad.
No,
You're not
no.
walking through their life and they've got to get to a place of strength, empowering them, like you say right on your website. You're teaching and empowering them to be able to make those choices for themselves. Hey, some choices are going to suck and we're
Yeah.
going to learn from them. Sometimes we win, sometimes we learn, but still there's like it is empowering because you're the one making those choices. Okay, so that
Absolutely.
didn't work, so I'm going to pivot, like you said, pivot and try something else. There's no shame in that, but being
Absolutely.
empowered to do that, that's huge.
Absolutely.
That's
Sometimes
really
people
huge.
just need a cheerleader to say, "Do it, try it."
Yes, and to let them know, hey, you're on track,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I just, before we jumped on today, I got a phone call. Just real quickly, I'll just say, from someone who said, "Oh my gosh, I was supposed to call you 3 days ago. This is what someone said to me about you." And I said, and it brought me to tears. And I was like, I gotta do a podcast. We can't talk anymore. I'm sitting here trying to fix my makeup. And I was like, no, it was exactly perfect because I believe that God has a plan and he ordains everything in my life. And I was like, you were meant to tell me that
Yeah.
right now because of the day I had yesterday and some of these things that have happened. I really needed to hear that because in my heart, I know what I know is true. But when it gets confirmed by
Mm,
someone who you hold in esteem and who knows what they're talking about, i.e., someone like you, that makes all the difference in the world. Sometimes we just need to know we're not alone. We've got someone in our corner, like you said, a cheerleader, because sometimes the people in our life just, it's not their job to do. It's nice when they do it. It's not their job to do it and get us to a place where we can be okay either way. But it's so great to have that.
it is. It is. I'm glad that you got that confirmation today.
Oh, it was so good. It was so good. And it means everything. And I just felt so invigorated just to go up about today. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, I get to talk to Angela. This is awesome. It lifts your spirits.
It's
So
relieving. Yeah.
yes, I really implore people to not do life alone. Don't do
For
life
sure.
alone.
Yeah.
Get someone in your corner, even if you just need to hear that you're on the right track, or, let's fix a couple stinking thinking. Who said Joyce Meyer said stinking thinking? Why don't I switch up? The only thing you can really control, what I say to people, is yourself.
Yeah,
Can't
that's right.
control anyone else's response. Really quickly, before I know we've done a lot today. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the book by Mel Robbins, Let Them. Big, huge wave right now. And, the whole premise is stopping and just saying, let them, whether it's parenting, whether it's a relationship. What are your thoughts on that theory? I'm sure you've already practiced that without maybe using those words with your clients, but what are your thoughts on why people may really be receiving that so well right now?
Yeah, it's so interesting. And it came at an interesting time. I'm very mad at Mel Robbins, by the way, because, yes, because she took my idea.
I knew you were going to say that. I'm like,
I
I
actually have the word surrender tattooed on my arm
love it.
and surrender really to me means let them. Like, I'm not in charge.
Mhm.
I thought I was. I like to think I am all the time. I'm not. I never am. And it's the same premise. And I think, especially right now in this entire cultural climate, that surrendering to what the reality is really important and really helpful. By the way, that makes you a healthy thinker if you can go, okay, well, that's how they think. That's okay. It's really nice to be flexible in that way. So I wish I had written the book, darn it. That's why I'm mad at her.
Right. No, I get that because when you're reading through it, it's like, it's just light bulbs are going off. And I'm like, this is so simple, yet
Yeah.
so empowering. Probably our word for the day is empowerment.
Yeah, let's have
I
that be our word of the day.
I love that. I love that for everybody. And we could talk all day long.
I
And I know you've
know.
got people waiting on you. So I just want to thank you again for joining me today, Angela, and for
Thank you.
really your sharing your wealth of wisdom and expertise in the relational realm and with the therapy and counseling. I am positive our listeners are going to want to know more about how they can reach you. So please let us know what's the best way for them to get in touch.
Yeah, the best way is my website, and that's thecounselingstudioclarkston.com. And I have all sorts of information on there. I have a contact page. If you prefer, the Counseling Studio is also located on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. So you can find me just about everywhere.
Perfect. And I can reiterate that yes, that website is packed with resources and amazing. And all that information is going to be within the episode down below so anyone can reach out, give you a call, reach out through email, through the website. So thank you again. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you, and I know that even from this conversation, it's going to really open up some hearts to maybe say, you know what? I think I am going to give this counseling thing a try.
Great. Thank you so much. I wish you immense amount of success on the podcast.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. And everyone watching, Angela and I want to thank you for joining us as well. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like our episode, tap that bell for notifications so that you will know when the new episodes of the Onward and Upward show and podcast are posted. And until next time, everybody be blessed.